It's true, isn't it? Like we all fear something. In fact, some of you, and we took down your names, had your light up the entire time. So we're a little concerned about you, right? Either you're scared of a lot of stuff, or you just didn't know exactly how that worked, and you're like, okay, we're doing this now? All right, sure, let's go. Hey, all right, I hope Beyonce comes out like you're at a concert or something like that. Hey, my name is Kent. I'm lead pastor here at Epic, and whether you are at Fairmount or Center City or Roxborough or right here in Parkside today, I want you to know I'm so glad that you're at church today. I'm so glad that you're here, and my hope for you is that you leave this place challenged and encouraged and knowing that what happens here matters because it really makes a difference in your life. And now today, we're kicking off this series that's all about fear, right? All about fear. And whether you had your light up the whole time or you never put your light up at all because you just don't participate in things like that, the truth is that we all know what it's like to experience fear. Now, for some people, their fear is more like this, right? You know what I'm saying? And these are the people that's like, man, their fear is so small, it's like they're not scared of anything, right? And we all wonder what's wrong with people like that. Because to have no fear whatsoever at all, that's just not normal, to have no fear. And you know who that is in your life because these are the people that at times, at different times, you've been both scared for them and scared of them. You know what I'm talking about? It's like you don't know exactly what they're going to do. You're like, oh, I don't know how this is going to play out, you know. Those are those people in your life. And then there's a group of people who they've got this amount of fear. All right, it's like, whoa, like that's a lot of fear they got going on there. And if you've got this amount of fear, man, it can be totally crippling. And in many cases, it can be so severe that it requires medication or maybe even as much as of a thing as like a miracle in order for someone to be able to recover or ever even be able to function at all. Now, this series, while I think it's going to be helpful for everybody, it isn't going to be sufficient for the people that are at the polar extremes of this whole fear continuum, right? If you got no fear at all, or if you've got this amount of fear, I don't think it's going to be sufficient. In fact, what I would say to you is, hey, if that's you, man, you need to find a counselor and talk through some things about what your next steps would be and how to move forward and deal with these things, because both of those things are a big deal. But this series is for the majority of us that find ourselves someplace in the middle, like someplace between all this fear and no fear whatsoever. And so to get us started, and for the sake of clarity, I just want to give you a working definition of fear. All right, so here it is. Here's what fear is. Fear is an emotion, right? It's something that we feel. Fear is an emotion that's caused by the belief that someone or something will potentially cause us harm or loss. It's an emotion caused by the belief that someone or something will potentially cause us harm or loss. Fear, it's this feeling that we get in response to some perceived threat out in our future. Now, experiencing fear can actually be a good thing. For example, having a healthy fear of getting run over by a car will keep you alive. Right? It's important. It's important that you have a healthy fear of being run over by cars. And so because of that fear, we've learned to look both ways before we cross the street. Don't want to get hit by a car. That's good fear. And so this is actually where fear kind of finds its purpose in our life. And so here's the thing. Good or healthy fear actually protects us. Good or healthy fear protects us. In fact, all throughout history, fear has actually played a key role in our survival. Like you go back to the saber-toothed tiger days, if you're walking around at night outside your cave and you heard some rustling in the bushes, fear would kick in. And when fear kicked in, all of a sudden, your heart would start beating faster, which would push blood to all your muscles. And your eyes, your pupils would dilate, which would sharpen your vision, right? And adrenaline would start to rush throughout your body in order to get you ready to fight for your life against some wild beast. That's good fear, right? That you need all of those things in a moment like that. And what's funny is I feel the exact same way for dumb reasons, like when I can't find my cell phone. You know what I'm saying? Like my heart starts beating fast, adrenaline's running through, my pupils dilate. I'm like, where's that phone? You know, so I don't know how that's evolved over time. But Anybody else have that issue? Am I the only one? Thank you. There's one other honest person on this planet. Great. So fear can be a good thing, but fear can also be a bad thing. And here's why. While good or healthy fear can protect us, bad or unhealthy fear restricts us. Bad or unhealthy fear restricts us. This kind of fear just has a way of keeping us from some things. I mean, think about this in your own life for just a second. Isn't this true? Isn't it true that fear has kept you from some things? It's kept you from doing some things that you wanted to do. It's kept you from experiencing some things that you wanted to experience. It's kept you from having some things that you wish you had. For some of you, fear is what's kept you from asking someone out. For others of you, fear is actually what kept you from breaking up with somebody because you just can't stand the thought of being alone. For some of you, fear has kept you from trying something that you wanted to try because you're afraid of failing or afraid of messing up. For others of you, fear is what's kept you from telling the truth because you're afraid of what other people might think. For some of us, fear is what's kept you in the exact same spot because you're afraid of change. For others of you, fear is actually what's kept you on the run professionally, on the run relationally, on the run spiritually. Right? And because of that, everything in your life is so shallow and so superficial because you're afraid to commit and dig in. And for some of us, if we think about it, our greatest regret in life can be traced back to a moment where fear was in control. Right? In fact, if we passed a mic around this morning, we can make a list a mile long of how fear has negatively impacted our lives. And at the end of that list, you know what we would realize? Fear is a thief. It robs you. It'll rob you of your joy. It robs you of time. It robs you of peace. It robs you of hope. It robs you of perspective. It robs you of your future. It'll rob you of your dreams. It robs you of potential. And ultimately, it robs you of the life that God always dreamed for you to have. It'll steal your joy. It'll kidnap your confidence. It'll hijack your hope. And what's worse is that oftentimes fear robs you of all those things before you ever even begin. You ever notice that? Fear strikes so fast. I mean, it happens so quickly. It's like living with this thing that just waiting to assassinate the potential of anything good before you ever even get a chance to consider what could be. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this. He says, fear has defeated more people than any other thing in this world. Any other thing in this world. Man, I don't want that to be you. You don't want that to be you. And I believe that somewhere down inside of you, there's a more fearless you who refuses to go one more day defeated by fear. It reminds me of one of my favorite shows from when I was a kid, Popeye the Sailor Man. Everybody remember Popeye the Sailor Man? Right, do you remember the song? Everybody know the song? You want to do it? Let's do it. All right. He's Popeye the Sailor Man. He's Popeye the... I'm strong to the... Because I eats my... I'm Popeye. Dude. Nailed it. Yeah. Love that show. It was awesome. So for those of you who don't... Some of you are like, what is that? For those of you that don't know, Popeye was this awesome guy who actually had a girlfriend, and her name was Olive Oil. Not sure what the deal with that was, but her name was Olive. And for the life of me, I don't know why, but it seemed like everybody was always trying to get with Popeye's girl, Olive. Everybody was. And so at first, Popeye, every episode was exactly the same. But at first, Popeye would be kind of cool with it. He'd be like, all right, no big deal. That's my girl. It's all right, you know. And she'd kind of, push away their advances and this kind of thing. But at some point, Popeye just got to the place where he just had enough. Where he was like done. And he was like, all right, that's it. And usually it was like when Olive was tied to some train tracks, like things that spiraled out of control. And that's when Popeye would say those famous words. Here it is, say it with me. That's all I can stand. I can't stand no more. That's all I can stand. I can't stand no more. And then he would pop open a can of spinach. Somehow bulging biceps would come flying out of his arms. And then Popeye would get the business done and get his girl back. It's a very chauvinistic show, and as I think back on it now, but anyways. So I don't know, man, but I can just imagine that there's probably so many of us this morning that would say, you know what? I'm so over being controlled by fear. Like, I'm so tired of being afraid. I'm so done with living a life less than its best because of fear. And I'd imagine that even if you wouldn't go that far as to say that, I would imagine that there's probably a lot of us that have gotten so used to the low hum of fear in our life that we don't even notice it anymore. But it's there, and it's controlling you, and it's keeping you from the life that God always dreamed for you to have. Man, my hope in this series is that it drives you to your own Popeye moment, where you look your fear in the face and you say, that's it. That's all I can stand, and I can't stand no more. No more. And here's why. It's because on the other side of fear is freedom. On the other side of fear is freedom. Isn't this true? I mean, fear really is a kind of prison. But on the other side of those prison walls is freedom. And I want that for you. I want that for your relationships. I want that for you at home. I want that for you at work. I want that for you emotionally and spiritually. I want that for you in every area of your life. Not to be restricted or confined by fear, but to be able to walk in the freedom that God has planned or intended for you. And so we're going to do a little deep dive on fear over the next few weeks. And so just to get us started, I want to tell you about something that a Harvard professor said. Is Dr. Carl Albrecht. He said that there's really only a few basic types or categories of fear. All right, we're going to talk through these. The first one is related to fears that have to do with our ego. The second is related to fears that have to do with some kind of separation. The third are fears that have to do with our loss of autonomy. And the fourth has to do with fears related to extinction. And so I want to talk through each one of these. And as we do, I think this will be fun. See which one of these you can most identify with, all right? So which one you're like, yep, that's me, all right? So let's do that. Here we go. So 4 basic types of fear. So for many of us, the first one, right? For many of us, our fear is based in or related to something having to do with our ego. You see, oftentimes people find their identity in what other people think about them. People find their identity in what they think about themselves. And so anything that threatens that can be scary. It's the root of a fear for us. This is why people fear failure. It's like, man, if I try and I fail, then my ego is going to be bruised. My ego is going to be hurt. And man, that means all of a sudden that I'm not as valuable, or I'm not as good, or I'm not as worthy as I was maybe before. It's also why people fear insignificance, right? We all want our life to matter. I mean, we all want other people to think that our life matters, and we want to think that our life matters. Ego-based fear, right? It makes us fear insignificance. Here's another one. Ego-based fear makes us fear humiliation, like specifically public humiliation. This is why it can be so hard for people to do things like dance in public, right? Or sing in public. Or for me, growing up, read in public. I spent all of my school year scared to death that the teacher was going to call on me to read the next paragraph. Just freaked out, right? And forget, like this, movies that start with like that paragraph of, hey, let's set the context, forget it. Like as soon as it starts, I'm like, I don't know anything about this movie. You know, the Star Wars movies in a galaxy far, I'm already lost. I'm like, are you serious? This is not fun, not good. And so because of that, because of those fears, this ego-based fear, we avoid those kinds of situations. We push those things off like they're the plague. We don't have to do anything like that. This is also why people fear public speaking, right? And unless you're like me and you just don't care, you know. Actually, I really do care. I have like a whole panic attack every single Sunday just before I come out here, so you're welcome. Another type of fear that we deal with is the fear having to do with separation. And this is all about the fear of not being connected to other people. You see, we as humans, we have this very strong basic need to belong. We fear being abandoned. We fear being rejected. And so this is why people fear being single. That's why for some people, it's a legit fear that I'll be single. And so that fear is what drives people to go from one unhealthy relationship to another, to another, to another. Do you know some people, it's like, man, you can't not be in a relationship? Like, what is that about? That's what's driving this. Can't stand the thought of ever being alone and not having a companion, right? That's also why people fear being alone. Right, just being alone in general. It's like, no, I just want to be connected to other people. It's also why people fear losing a loved one. Losing a loved one. Now, another type of fear or category of fear is fear that's related to our loss of autonomy. And here's what that is. We hate not being in control of our own lives, or feeling like we're not in control of our own lives. And so this is why people are scared to death of losing their job. It's like, if I lose my job, then I'll lose my ability to be able to do whatever I want because I won't have any money. And all of a sudden there's a domino effect of things that I just can't control. If I lose my job, it's a big problem, right? This is why that girl and that guy that you dated who had commitment issues feared being in a serious relationship, because they couldn't give up the freedom of being able to do whatever it is they wanted to do, right? This is why people legit fear not driving. You know what I'm saying? Like, they always want to drive. You're going someplace, they're like, I'll drive. And it's like, what do you mean you'll drive? It's like, no, I'll drive. They just want to be in control. And I totally get that, right? They want to be in control. This whole like Tesla, like self-driving car thing, bump that. Are you nuts? Right? Like, I might trust the car, but I'm not going to trust that it's going to stay in between the lines. You know, it might even not be the car's fault. Have you seen some of these lines? These people don't do the lines very good. Like, it's like this sometimes. I'm like, I don't trust the car with those lines. So it's a breakdown. I'm just saying, right? So people fear not driving because of that. People will actually drive themselves someplace and meet you at the place you were both going, could have gone together, because they just want to be able to leave when they want. You know what I'm saying? Right? Fear is what drives all of that. This is what keeps people from elevators. It's like, oh, what happens if I'm in an elevator and it gets stuck? Anybody have that fear? Right? That's a terrible thing. What if it gets stuck? You have no options. Here's another one. What if you're stuck in an elevator and you got to use the bathroom? That's a fear you probably hadn't considered yet, right? Like, what are you going to do? And if you do something, how are you going to explain that when they open the door? You could be like, that was here when I came in. This fear, the loss of autonomy, this is also why people fear aging or getting older, because at some point you start to lose your independence. Isn't it true? And then here's the fourth one. The fear is related to extinction. Anybody know what this is? It's the fear of death. Yeah, it's the fear of death. Turns out none of us likes dying. None of us. Not one of us likes to die. And so that's why we fear things like cancer or gun violence. Right? Chicago, over 2,000 people have been shot this year. That's bananas. Are you serious? That's why we fear things like snakes, poisonous snakes. Just snakes in general. All the reptiles, all of them, we fear them all because we think they can cause us harm and eventually cause us to die. That's why we fear that. This is also why we fear things like the ocean. You know what I'm saying? Like, not only can you drown, but that's where sharks live. That's their house. That's where the sharks live. That is their home. That's their abode, and they can do whatever they want in their house. This summer, my son Cohen and I went on a trip together, and as part of the trip, one of the things we did is we rented wave runners at the beach, or one wave runner at the beach. And so we got on this wave runner, and they told us, here's the rules. The guy was like, you can go 5 hotels that way and 5 hotels that way, which was a really long ways. And he says, you can go out as far as you want to go, except remember that if you can't see us, we can't see you. And so we're on that wave runner, like flying, just going nuts, having a good old time. And then at some point, we're like way out in the middle of the ocean, and we fell off the wave runner. I had no idea how hard it was to get back on that thing. If I'd have known it was that hard, we'd have gone like 10 feet. We're way out in the middle of the ocean. I'm just sitting there like, me and Cohen, I look at Cohen, I'm like, oh man. So I'm trying to climb back on this thing. At my 10th try, I counted. At my 10th try, my son Cohen looks at me and he goes, Dad, I'm worried. And I was thinking to myself, you should be. This is how we die. Like, this is it, right? And then all of a sudden, I was keenly aware of the fact that this is the shark's home. This is where the shark lives, and whatever it is that's swimming around down there right now is looking up at me with my big old, like, drumsticks thinking, And Cohen with his little drumettes, he's trying to decide, are we gonna go for the appetizer or straight to dinner? Like, which? So finally, the guy from shore saw that we were having problems, and so he gets on a jet ski and he comes out to get us, and I take Cohen, I'm able to get Cohen up on the wave runner, and then the guy just throws me a rope. So I just had to hold on to this rope as he towed us back to the beach. And right when I thought this whole saga was almost over, almost gonna be done, I'm holding on to the rope, and I realize my pants start going. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh no! And we're getting closer and closer to the beach. I'm like, no! And in that moment, I had to make a decision. I had to make a choice. It was like, hold on and get towed into the beach with no pants, or let go and drown. So I just let go. I was like, oh, Lord, just take me home. I'm ready to go, because there's no way I'm going to get up out this beach and walk up there with no pants. I mean, here I was in that moment of decision. It was between the fear of ego being bruised and extinction, and I chose extinction. I'm like, yep, that's the better option. Now, I went through all 4 of these types of fear in such detail because this. Understanding why you fear something is the first step in overcoming something that you fear. Like, understanding the why you fear something is the first step in overcoming something that you fear. See, if you could figure out the why, if you can figure out the why behind your fear, then you can see it for what it is and handle it or deal with it how you should. You got to figure out the why. Now, this is the kind of thing that a counselor would help you do, like help you figure out or discover the why behind your fear. But as a follower of Jesus, I want to share this with you this morning. There's so much more available to us in dealing with fear than just being able to determine why we're afraid and hoping we can deal with it a little better. Like, there's so much more available to us as followers of Jesus. And so I want to talk about that. Over and over again, all throughout scriptures, whenever you see the word fear, oftentimes another word kind of tags along with it. And that word, it's a word you wouldn't expect. That word is love. It's love. And I want you to look at what John, one of the disciples, said about this. He says, there's no fear in love, but perfect love drives out all fear. There's no fear in love, but perfect love drives out all fear. And here, John, he's talking about God's love, God's perfect, unconditional, undeserved love toward us. He's talking about God's love. And here's what he says. He says, as you think about God's love for you, there's no fear that comes along with that kind of love. Or there's no fear that can exist in the same space of having that kind of love. He says, when you finally are able to grasp and get your arms around how much your Heavenly Father loves you, you won't have to be dominated by fear anymore. In fact, he takes it a step further and he says that it's God's perfect love that actually drives out fear. It drives it out. It pushes it out. It expels it. It pushes it away. You can think of it this way. God's love is so big. God's love is so great. It takes up so much space that there's no room for fear if God's love is present. Like, all the fears that you have, it's not that they don't exist. It's just that they're dwarfed in comparison to God's love for you. He says, you want to know how to dial back the power of fear in your life? Begin to understand the depth and the grandness of God's love for you. Start to understand just how much God loves you. You see, understanding the why behind your fear is important, but understanding the depth of God's love for you is even more important, because God's love for you, that's the thing that has the power to defang fear. That's the thing that has the power to defang fear. The Apostle Paul talked about this. Now, this is a guy, he knew about fear. And this is a guy who was whipped, he was beaten, he was falsely accused, he was dragged to court, he was sent to prison, he was chained up, bitten by a snake, he was shipwrecked, probably fell off his jet ski, all kinds of problems. And he knew trouble, and he had every reason to be afraid, but fear didn't control and dominate his life. Rather, something else that was so much bigger than that is what dominated his life. He writes about it, Romans 8, verse 35, he says this: who shall separate us from the love of Christ? He says, like, who or what could possibly be big enough, great enough, powerful enough to do anything to us that God in his love for us won't be able to help us through? Like, who or what could be that powerful that God wouldn't be able to help us through it? And then he lists a bunch of stuff. He says this: shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness on the beach or danger or sword, or I would add, or fears related to our ego, or fears related to being separated from others, or fears that are related to our loss of autonomy and being able to control everything, or fears related to death. Who? What could possibly? Are there any of those things that are bigger or more powerful than God's love? Then he answers, verse 37, no, not at all. He says, in all these things, in my things, in your things, in all of our things, we can be, and I love this word, more than conquerors through him who loved us. More than conquerors through him who loved us. He says, none of it, not one of those things, not one of those fears that you have is bigger than what God will do in your life because he loves you. You see, God's love has an answer for every single one of those fears, every single one. And when it comes to fears that are related to our ego, things like fear of failure and humiliation and insignificance, God's answer to those fears is this: it doesn't matter what you think about you. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about you. You matter. You have worth. You have value. And not for any other reason except for I say so. I mean, think about this. The value of something is determined by what someone is willing to pay in order to get it, right? And Jesus gave his life for you. So what does that say about your value? You know what it says? You matter. God's answer for our fears that are associated with being separated from others is this: my love for you is so great that I will never leave you. I will never leave you. Everyone else might, but I won't. No matter where you go or what you do, I will never, ever leave you. If you're single and you're worried that you'll be alone for the rest of your life without having a companion, God doesn't promise that you'll have a companion, but he does promise his companionship. He does promise that he'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. He'll always be with you. And even if you've lost the one that you loved, you will never, ever lose the one who loves you most. Do you know what I'm saying? That's how powerful God's love is. God's answer for our fear of losing autonomy, losing control, first of all, is the reality that we were never in control in the first place. We were never in control in the first place, right? We are all recklessly out of control. And I know some of you are like, that's not helping. Okay. But God said, or his answer to that is this: hey, I love you so much that I'm gonna give you something. I'll throw you a bone. I'll give you something to anchor yourself to, and that is, I can be trusted. With all of your doubts and fears and every uncertainty that you have about your future, I can be trusted. I can't promise that nothing bad's ever gonna happen in your life, but I can promise you that you can trust me through it all. So don't make me the co-pilot. Give me the steering wheel. right? Jesus, take the wheel. Thank you, Carrie. All right, so, right? And then for those of you who fear death, you know what God's answer to that is? He says, I loved you so much, I took death on and I defeated death. I defeated death, and so because of that, death has no power over you anymore. And the bad news about that is that 1 out of 1 people die. We all die. I don't know if you know that. Some of you are like, no amount of Botox. All right, so, but because of God's love for you, it's okay that we all die. Because of that, you and I, we can stand with the hope of eternity in our future. We can stand on, if you're a follower of Jesus, you made him the forgiver of your sin and leader of your life, we can live our life with the hope of eternity in our future. That's an amazing thing. You know, Paul, he says, listen, with God and his love for you on your side, you don't have to just barely beat fear. No, you can more than conquer fear. You can more than conquer fear. And I just wanted to tell you that today. So for those of you that find yourself at a place where fear has kept you up at night, for those of you that have been overwhelmed and overcome because of fear, for those of you who are paralyzed by fear, or those of you who've been driven to do some things you regret because of fear, for all of you who'd say, that's it, that's all I can stand. I can't stand no more. You don't have to stand it anymore. Because God's love for you is so big and so powerful that nothing, absolutely no thing can overcome it. And I'm telling you, the moment that comes alive for you is the moment that fear stops controlling you. It's the moment fear stops controlling you. Because God's love has the power to silence the voice of fear in your life. You know, as a dad, I want my kids to live fearless lives. Like, I want them to live fearless. I don't want them to live restricted or boxed in or scared all the time. I want them to live fearless lives. And if or when anything threatens that, as their father, I got something for whatever's threatening them. Like whoever, whatever, I got something for them. It's coming. Your Heavenly Father feels the same way about you. He feels the same way about you. Don't live restricted. Find your freedom because of God's love for you. He's got your back. Are you kidding me? You should be walking around a little cocky. Like, what? You know? And next week, we're going to talk about fear's cousin. Anxiety. Yeah. But today, I just wanted you to know that your biggest, baddest fear on its biggest, baddest day would tremble if it knew what it was up against. Tremble. That's why Paul, in the very same chapter, said this, Romans 8:31. What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, then who? What fear could be against us? What wouldn't you do knowing that God is for you? What chance wouldn't you take knowing that God is for you? What would you stop doing knowing that God is for you? Who? What? Nothing. I asked the team to come and lead us in a song that I think really captures so much of what we talked about today. It declares just the greatness of God and the power of his name. It says that he makes the darkness tremble and he silences fear. Silences fear. That's the power of God's love. It can silence fear. So I just want to invite you to take a moment and join us as we declare this together.